47.
47. I mean 47, I apologize. I'm getting ahead of myself.
You got me nervous for a second.
So I make sure everybody is
paying attention. Say thank you. All right, Jabosai, good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is Mem Zayin 47. We are starting from the top line of Mem Zayin. Va'amar Rava. Bosai, our shir this morning is dedicated by the Shrek family for the entire week in honor of the upcoming yahrzeit of Freda Bas Moshe Yosef on the 11th of Shvat. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Sham will have an aliyah and the family ein chama. And we'll say with that, let's begin. Va'amar Rava. So Rava says, top line, Mem Zayin, Amudala 47a. Va'amar Rava. Hani, so we'll say, remember again, we're still focusing over here on the halachos concerning the lungs. Actually, we're going to get more into the lungs in just a little, over the next couple of days, we're going to be focusing a lot on the lungs. And the Gemara says, Va'amar Rava. Hani tarti bui. Dismichi lahadadi. So we'll say if you have two blisters on the lungs that are next to each other, les luhu bidikasa. We'll say the halacha is that there is no need to examine it because we know that the animal is a treifa. Now we'll say the idea the Gemara, what Rav is saying over here is the presence of two blisters indicates halacha lamaisa that there is some type of nekev, that there is some type of hole within the lung itself. Therefore, wherever you see two blisters, ultimately no further bedika is necessary. The animal is a treifa. So the Gemara says, what happens if you have one blister, but it looks like two blisters? So we'll say this would be just a larger blister. If you have one blister that looks like two, so what's talacha? What do? Maisinon silu. You take a thorn, and you puncture the blister. If all of the contents of what appear to be two blisters flows out of the one puncture, again, remember, if all of the contents flow out of the one puncture, that indicates that what? That it was really one blister. So chadihi, it's one blister, ukshera, ve'ilo, but I will say if as a result of one puncture in one side of the blister, not all of the contents of the blister comes out, then tartinin utreifa. Then ultimately, again, it is two blisters, and the animal is a treifa. Good. Va'amar Rava. So we'll say Rava goes weiter, and he says like this: Hey uni isla l'reya. So we'll say Rava says the lungs are comprised of 5 lobes, 5 different lobes. Apa klape gavra. So we'll say this lashon hara is a little bit confusing. When the face of the animal is opposite a person, we'll say here, face actually means the underside of the animal, and the orientation that they're talking about over here is when the animal is hanging by its hind legs. Because remember again, that's how you would open up an animal and ultimately take out the lungs and everything else. So when the animal is hanging by its hind legs and facing a person, so tlasa miyamina, 3 of the lobes of the lungs would be to the right, vitarti mismola, 2 of the lobes would be on the left. We'll say the reason why this is important is why? Because chasir o yasir o chalif, because we'll say if there are more than this number of lobes, less than this number of lobes, o chalif, or I will say the right-left orientation is reversed, the halacha is treifa. The halacha is the animal is considered to be a treifa. So the Gemara tells the story. Hahu yisei rasa da'asoy lekamei dimeremar. So we'll say there was a situation of an animal that had a quote-unquote extra lobe. An extra lobe, and somebody shechted the animal, so that the animal had an extra lobe. They brought it before Meremar. Hava Yosef Rav Acha above. Supposed to listen to this, it's actually amazing. So remember again, so they're bringing it to Meremar to paskin on the animal. Rav Acha was sitting at the entranceway, the entranceway of Meremar's home, as the animal was being brought in. Amrale, so we'll say, so just to understand, the guy, call him the owner of the animal, is bringing the animal into Meremar's home to check on the kashrus of the animal with an extra lobe, lobe in the lungs. Okay? The guy comes out, Rav Acha says, Amrle, my Amrlecha. So the guy asked, Rav Acha asked the guy, what did Meremar tell you? Amrle, Achshra Nehele. He said, he told me it's kosher. So we'll say, so obviously Rav Acha is bothered by this. Amrlei Hadr Aili Kamei. So Rav Acha says, I think you should take the animal back in and ask the Shaila again. Why Rabbi say? Because Rav Acha said that the halacha follows Rava. Rava says any extra lung lobes make the animal a treifa. Therefore, Rav Acha felt Mereimar maybe didn't understand the shaila, or maybe he just made a mistake. So therefore, Rav Acha urges the guy, the owner of the animal, take the animal back in and ask the shaila again. So the guy goes back in, asks the shaila again. Listen to this, and the guy comes back out, and and Mereimar had told the petitioner to give a message. Amarlei, Zil imale leman diyasev abava. Do me a favor. Go tell that guy who is sitting by my doorway, Les hilchasa kavase de Rava biyiseres. That the halacha does not follow Rava with an extra lobe. So obviously, Mereimar picked up on the fact that whoever this was, I don't know if he knew that it was Rav Acha or someone else, but he understood that whoever it was who was telling the petitioner to go back in and ask the shaila again, thought that the halacha followed Rava, that wherever there's an extra lung lobe, the animal becomes a treifa, and at least to get Baruch official here. Oh, good, I'm good. So didn't want a table accident over here. So therefore again, Mereimar goes ahead and says to the message, tell the guy who's sitting at my doorway, the halacha does not follow Rava, and therefore an extra lung lobe does not automatically make the animal a treifa. Now there's a qualification. V'hani mili dikaimi bidara du'uni. When do we say that an extra lobe does not necessarily make the animal a treifa? That's only about to say when the extra lobe is bidara du'uni, arranged in a row with the other lobes. Aval beni, I'll say if the extra lobe is in between two rows of lung lobes, then halacha lamaisa treifa. Then the animal will be a treifa. So also what we begin to see is that halacha lamaisa, the presence of an extra lobe by itself in a vacuum, does not automatically make the animal a treifa. Rather, it appears that everything is dependent on where the extra lobe is situated. If it's if it's just along the row of lobes, then it's fine. If it's in between two rows of lobes, then ultimately again it'll be problematic. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara explains. So Hahu beni the asal kamed Ravashi. So we'll say there was this case of beni. So we'll say there was a case of an additional lung. There was a case. Hahu beni. There was an extra case of an additional lobe between two rows of lobes that came before Ravashi. Ravashi the mitzvah. So Ravashi wanted to declare the animal a treifa. Amrli Rav Huna Mar Bar Avia. So we'll say this is one name. Rav Huna Mar, that's his name. Bar Avia said. So we'll say, okay. So I'm sorry. Let me go back for just a moment. So we'll say, so what we've established is as follows: an extra lobe. Does it make an animal a treifa? And the answer is, it depends, right? If it's along the regular, apparently, row of lobes, it does not. If it's in between two rows of lobes, it does. Okay. Based on that, what happened? So ahu beni. So we'll say there was a case of an animal that had an extra lobe in between two rows of lobes. So what happened? It came up for Ravashi, the mitzvah. So Ravashi said, okay, we'll say this seems pretty straightforward. We've got an extra lobe in between two rows of lobes that would seem to clearly make the animal a treifa. So Amali Rav Huna Mar Bar Avia. So Rav Huna Mar Bar Avia said to Ravashi as follows: don't declare this animal a treifa. Why not? This is actually quite interesting. Kol hani chiyui b'raisa haki islahu. All of these types of animals. We'll say now what types of animals. Actually, it's quite interesting. Take a look at Rashi. B'raisa, Rashi says it's like about 4 lines up from before the lines get wide. B'raisa ro'os be'efar va'amrila b'raisa b'rios ushmenos. So as I say, interestingly enough, these seem to be free-range animals. All of these types of free-range animals, ra'os be'efa, right? They free-range. They graze wherever they want, and as a result, brios, they're very healthy. Ushmenos, I don't know, it doesn't sound nice, Zaftig, right? Right, that's much nicer, right? They're healthy. They're healthy. Kinai Nahara. Right? So we'll say what's interesting about this is as follows. Apparently, these free-range animals, which were stronger and fatter and larger and healthier, apparently normally had an extra lobe in the lungs. So we'll say, I guess this was as a result of their larger size or a result of their larger girth. So ultimately, again, they had extra lung capacity. This was not a treifa. This was the nature of the animal. The karle tabchi, the butchers used to call this inunisa de varda, the small rose-like lobe. So we'll say the picture of this lobe actually looks a little bit like the formation of a rose, and it's a smaller lobe. It's a smaller additional lobe. So we'll say it's actually quite fascinating. So now what's interesting about this is as follows, is that this extra lobe is in between the two rows of other lobes, which would, under normal circumstances, cause the animal to be considered what? Cause the animal to be considered a treifa. But apparently, again, in this type of animal, this free-range animal, this extra lobe was commonplace, and therefore, again, did not cause the animal to be a treifa. Incredible. So Yimon was right. V'hanimili, I will say, when does the presence of this additional rose-like lobe not make the animal a treifa? V'hanimili megavoy. I will say that's only if the extra lobe literally is on the inside, which means the underside of the lungs. Only if the extra lobe is on the underside of the lungs. However, Amud Beis, aval agaba, Rabbi say if at the end of the day the extra lobe is on the top of the lungs, then afilu kitarfa de asa chefa. Rabbi say even if you have an additional lobe that is as small as literally as a myrtle leaf, right? The little leaf of a hados. Even if it's as small as a little myrtle leaf, treifa, that ultimately makes the animal a treifa. Beautiful. Amar Rafram. So what Rafram says as follows. Whoever knew there's so much, people say, you know what the Musar is? Look how much Torah there is just about a lung. I want to see how much Torah there is for us to learn. It's incredible. This is all just about lungs. One little part of the animal's body, not even our body, right? This is all in the animal's body. So much Torah to learn. Amar Rafram. Hi Reya. The Damyula Ufsa. What's like Mem Zainam Abayz 47b, 3 lines down. A lung that is like the Damyula Ufsa. We'll say Ufsa means wood. So if the lung is like a piece of wood, we'll discuss what that means in just a moment. Treifa. So ultimately, again, this makes the animal a treifa. So we'll say, what does that mean that the lung is like wood? So we have a machlokas. Iked amri bechazusa. So some say what it means ultimately is that it looks like wood. We'll define what that means in just a moment. The iked amri bigishta. Others say that it means it feels like wood. Iked amri dineficha. So we'll say in terms of the opinion who says that if the lung looks like wood, we'll say what that means is dineficha means the lung is bloated. If the lung is bloated, it takes on a whitish appearance. That whitish appearance is what Chazal are telling us means looks like wood. So if ultimately, again, it's bloated, looks like wood, then it's a treifa. Ve'ika da'amri, others explain, de pechiza. We'll say if you look at pechiza, Rashi says, second line down from the top, kasha, v'haim namike yishta. We'll say pechiza means it's hard like a piece of wood. Ve'ika da'amri, others say, de shia. Others here will say actually the psul that's being, or the treifa psul that's being mentioned over here is that the lung is smooth, the less la chitucha deuni. We'll say literally translated, it doesn't have the lobe divisions. In other words, the way that lungs are supposed to look is that each lobe is an entity to itself. If the lungs are smooth, so that ultimately, again, there is no division of the lobes, that would be a treifa as well. Incredible. Amar Rava says, kikuchlo kshera. This is actually very interesting. Rashi says, kikuchla means if the lungs are blue. Rashi says, kikuchla, seva kachol, shuhu kimara lazur, lo yarok v'lo shachas. So say, if Rava says, if the lungs are blue, the lungs are still kosher. In other words, the animal's kosher. Kidiyusa, if the lungs are black, right? We'll say kidiyusa literally means like ink. Rashi says kidiyusa koret dio yaveshfu shachar, dried ink, which is black. So if the lungs are black, then ultimately the animal is a treifa. Da'amar Rav Chanina shachar adamhu ela shalaka. Because we'll say after Rabbi Chanina said, that Rabbi says, we're going to see in just a moment, Rabbi Chanina said the statement Rabbi Chanina has absolutely nothing to do with Hilchos Shchita. We'll see what it means just now. Rabbi Chanina said that black is really red, which was stricken. So we'll say, what does this mean? Look at Rashi. Rabbi Chanina, le'inyan damnida. So we'll say, this is actually a very important halakha in damnida, right? So we know that not every color of damnida renders or I should say, not every color of blood renders a woman a nida. But again, among the colors that are problematic are red and black. Why black? So we'll say the Gemara says that black is really red, ela shalaka. It's really red, but ultimately, again, it was quote unquote stricken, right? So it's decaying red. So we'll say, so ultimately says the Gemara is quoting Rabbi Chanina's statement, by the way, is by Hilchos Nida. Right, Rabbi Chanina's statement is not by Shchita. But what the Gemara's understanding is as follows: that if you have a lung that is black, then I will say, what does that mean? What does that mean? The lung is decaying. And if the lung is decaying, then ultimately that is a siman treifa. Rashi says, Ela shalaka, alma lukusihu. Therefore, we'll say, if you have a lung that is blackened, it is decaying. V'sofa lirkav v'linakev. And therefore, again, it's only a matter of time until it decays further and ultimately perforates. Yeroka. We'll say, what happens if the lung is yarok? Now, we'll say, I want to point out something interesting. Anytime in Gemara, whenever you see the word yarok, we'll say, yarok is always creates confusion because sometimes yarok is yellow and sometimes yarok is green. So we're going to see that confusion come about in just a moment. So yaroka kshera. So we'll say if it's yarok. Now Rashi says ke'en asavim, like grass. So Rashi's it's like a spoiler alert over here, right? Rashi's giving it away already. It's just mamish. Didn't even make us struggle, right? Rashi is talking about green, right? That ultimately, again, I will say, if it's green, then we're going to see that if Yeroka Kshera, if the lung is green, then ultimately, again, it is still kosher. Midrab Nasan, right? Midrabi Nasan. Adoma Kshera, maybe Midrabi Nasan, but say similarly, if the lung is red. Now I will say, now you'll say to yourself, of course, if the lung is red, then it's supposed to say, so what we're really going to see is if the lung is excessively red. In other words, more red than usual, redder than usual, that is not a siman treifa, and ultimately, again, the animal is still kosher. Mid Rabbi Nasan. And I will say, both of these statements are based on Rabbi Nasan. Now here's, the Gemara is going to quote an amazing halacha. Desanya. So I'll say, here we're going to quote an incredible brisa that speaks about, again, excessive redness. Again, nothing to do with trephis or with shchita. But again, you're going to see what redness means. Desanya. Rabbi Nasan is amazing. Rabbi Nasan says, Omer, Pam achos halachti lekrache hayam. One time I went overseas. Basa isha achas lefanai. A woman came before me. Shemala b'na rishon umeis. And this woman, Nebuch, she had given birth to a boy, and he died as a result of the first bris. Let me say it differently. And her first son died as a result of bris milah. Sheni, she had a second son, umeis, and he died as a result of bris milah. Shlishi, now she has a third son. And of course, again, she doesn't know what to do with this child. Hevi asa lefanai. She brought the baby before me, again asking Shaila, what should I do about this baby? So Ra'isiv Shahaya Adom. I saw Rabbi Nasan says that the baby was excessively red. The baby was very red. Amarti la biti. I said to her, my daughter, Hamtini lo at sheyivla bo damo. Wait, literally again, until his blood becomes absorbed in his body. So we'll say, I don't know what the medical condition over here, or what Rabbi Nasan was saying. But Rabbi Nasan understood that ultimately, again, the blood had not absorbed. Generally, again, the Gemara speaks about children dying machmas milah, and generally, again, I will say, the way it's understood is that was hemophilia, right? Children die as a result of hemophilia. Here, I'm not exactly sure what's happening over here. Rashi says, "Sheivla bo damo, she damo nivla b'vsaro, she damo holech bein or lebasar." So we'll say, Rashi seems to understand it more as a circulatory issue. That ultimately, again, the excessive redness was a result of a poor circulation. Give the baby time to develop better circulation, and the baby will be okay. So we'll say, therefore, Rabbi Nasan says, wait till the circulation the circulation is a bit better. You'll circumcise him, and everything will be fine. So this is amazing. Himtinolo, they waited. Mala also, they gave the baby a bris milah, mazel tov, v'chaya, and the baby lived. This is amazing. V'hayakorin also, nasan habavli al shmi. And that was amazing. They named the baby Nasan Habavli. So also what's interesting is apparently not just Nasan, but Nasan Habavli. And I will say this probably is an incredible Gemara. Why? Because I will say this Gemara also points out that clearly, again, at least historically, there was a very commonly held custom to name after living people, which is actually quite fascinating. Today you'll find this in the Sephardic community. You don't find this as much in the Ashkenazic community, but it's clear, again, we have a number of stories like this in the Gemara of naming after living people. So here you see this baby was named in honor of Nasan. And I will say again, you could say Nasan, you could just say Nasan, and if you name them Nasan what? Generic, right? He could be named after who? There was a prophet, right? There was a prophet, Nasan HaNavi, right? There was I know, it's Navi, right? I'm sorry. Right? There was a prophet named Nasan HaNavi, right? David HaMelech, Bathsheba, right? So Nasan was one of the Nevi'im. So, but the fact that they named him Nasan HaBavli clearly indicates that they were dafka naming him after Rabbi Nasan. It's quite amazing. So the Gemara goes right there. Shuv Pamachas. We'll say another story. Then we'll say, why is the Gemara bringing this story? The Gemara is bringing this story ultimately to tell you, because remember, Rabbi Nasan was the one who said that if the lung is excessively red, that is not a treifa issue. There might be a circulation issue, but it's not a treifa issue. So even if the lung is excessively red, ultimately, again, the animal is still kosher. V'shuv pamachas, another time, halachti lemedinas Kaputkia. One time I went to this country of Kaputkia. Basa isha lafanai, a woman came before me. Shemala ben Arishon umeis. She had a son. She circumcised him, and he died. Sheni umeis. Second son was born. She circumcised him, and he died. Shlishi havi asa lafanai. She brought the third child before me, and I examined him. Ra'isiv shahaya yarok. So I will say, I saw that what? Apparently he was jaundiced, right? He was yellow. Now, I'll say, remember how I said before that yarok is a bit confusing? So I'll say, so again, it could be green, it could be yellow. Hitzat stibo. Ultimately, again, I looked at the kid. Velo haya bo dambris. So I'll say, literally translated, what it means is I saw that he had no blood. So again, it seems to be some type of circulation issue. So amarti labiti hamtini lo achi damo. My daughter, wait, don't give him the bris milah now. Wait until the blood settles a bit more. Himtina lo, she waited. Umala also, and ultimately she circumcised him. V'chaya, and Baruch Hashem, he lived. V'chaya Korin also, Nasan Habavli al Shmi. So I'll say it's incredible, right? Rabbi Nasan, what a schos, right? Rabbi Nasan, I will say, all of these kids named in his honor. Once again, a little Nasan, all these Nasan Habavlis running around in honor of Nasan Habavli. So we'll say, I want to be clear. The reason the Gemara quotes both of these stories is because Rabbi Nasan is on record as saying both of these halachas. Rabbi Nasan said that if the lungs are yeroka, right, if the lungs are green, then ultimately, again, they're kosher. If the lungs are red, then they're kosher. The Gemara brings these stories to indicate that Rabbi Nasan understood that excessive redness or greenness is a result of poor circulation, ultimately, again, is a remediable situation. He really brought it down by bris milah, but ultimately, we're applying to the lungs of the animal. Rav Kana, so we'll say the Gemara says as follows. Rav Kana says, Kekavdo kshera. If the lungs are the same color as the liver, then ultimately, again, the animal is still kosher. Rashi says, Kekavdo kshera. We'll say this Rashi is right across from Hagos Habach, or right across from Tosos Dishia. Reya shemarish shelo doma lakavid kshera. If you have lungs, that have the same type of coloration or look the same as the liver, ultimately, again, it is still kosher. Kibisra. It was actually very interesting. If the lungs look like a piece of meat, then ultimately, again, the lungs are treifa. The animals are treifa. Look at Rashi, kibisra treifa. V'hachi kimlu b'dahachi av yelakusa u'b'hachi lo hav yelakusa. So we'll say if the lungs look like meat, then ultimately, again, they are a treifa. V'simonach, and I will say the way to remember this is ubasar basada treifa lo sochelun. So the Gemara goes like, Ama Rav Sama Brei Rava. Hi Reya. Another interesting case I will say. The damya kikishusa. We'll say if lungs kishus we'll say are hops, right? If the lung looks like hops, ukimorika, or like saffron, ukigon biasa, or we'll say like an egg. So we'll say these are all different shades of yellow. If the lungs are yellow, then ultimately again treifa. The animal is going to be treifa. Elo, so we'll say if that's the case, that yellow is treifa, we'll say let's go back for just a moment. What did we just say before? We said that yarok is kosher. The both said, now the Gemara was working under the interpretation that yarok can mean what? Red or green. You just told me now, I'm sorry, green or yellow, thank you. Whoa, all right, mamish. Baruch Hashem, fantastic, good. Wonderful. People take their lungs very seriously. So the Gemara just said, you just said that yarok is kosher. We just said, we assume that yarok could mean green or yellow. So now you're telling me that if it's yellow, then it's a treifa. So what's the case of yarok then that is kosher? El yaroka dikshera hechi damya. So I'll say ultimately again, so what's the case of yarok that is kosher? Kekarsi. We'll say literally again, it's yarok like a leek. So we'll say ultimately again, yellow will be treifa, but green ultimately again will be a kosher lung, will be kosher animal. Amar Avino. So we'll say now we move away from colors and ultimately again into the physical properties of the lungs themselves. It's actually quite amazing. Amar Avino. Ravina says, Atum bereir. We'll say what happens if the lung is sealed off. So we'll say atum means it's closed off. If you look at Rashi over here, if you look, actually not yet. Here Rashi says atum beria. Rashi says duchta dimentamtim v'lo ayil zegel begava. But we'll say there is. Remember again, we already mentioned this a little bit in the previous day's daf. We're going to focus on this more, but we speak about the concept of sirchus, of lesions on the lungs. But one of the primary ways in which we check the lungs is how we inflate them. But say what happens if you have some type of atum means some type of closure, right, or a seal, like some type of closure in the lungs that prevents the lungs from being inflated. So I say, so what happens? Atum literally means closed off, right? So if the lung is closed off, so what do we do? So we'll say, my seal and sakina. So the first step is we bring a knife, vikarin alam. We cut open the closure. I ispa mugla. If pus comes out, vaday machmas muglahu. Uksher. Then we'll say we assume that the closure was really just a result of the pus, and the animal is kosher. Ve'ilau, but I will say if after we open up the closure, and ultimately again, either no pus comes out, or it's still not, or the air is still not flowing through it, then what do? Musvinon ala gatfa orokva. So say on the place that we cut open, we go ahead and what? We put on it a feather or some saliva, and then we put air through it. So we'll say if the feather or the pus moves as a result of the airflow, not the pus, the saliva moves as a result of the airflow, then kshera. Then we'll say that indicates to us that what? That the air is flowing and ultimately again the lungs are kosher. Ve'ilo, but I will say if you go ahead and you place the feather or the saliva on the place of the opening and it does not flutter, when you put air through it, then what? Treifa. Then that indicates to us that the animals are treifa. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says as follows: Krum, shala machmas maka. We'll say if you have a krum, literally means like a scab. If you have a scab that formed on the lungs as a result of some type of injury, right? Eino krum. We'll say ultimately again, it's not going to be a proper seal. It's not going to be a proper scab. Rashi says Eino krum shesofo lisaser. Because they'll say we assume that any scab that forms on the lungs ultimately will come off. So we'll say we're going to spend significant amount of time speaking of this halachos. These are halachos that's called sircha. We'll say sircha means types of scabs that form on top of lungs. We're going to get into this. So v'amar Rav Yosef, hayreya da'avsha. We'll say again, if you have, this is actually an interesting case. If you have a reya, if you have a lungs that have a hissing sound. We'll say what that means is if you fill the lungs with air and you hear air escaping somewhere on the lungs, if you know, right, right, like a flat lungs, right, if you know ultimately, again, where the hissing, so we'll say, what's the problem with the hissing sound? You know this if you've ever had this on your tire. We'll say, figuring out where is it coming from. So watch this. If you know where the hissing sound is coming from, Iadinan, Heicha Da'avsha, if you know where the hissing sound is coming from, so what? Manichan ale gadfa ogila. You place on that spot either a feather or a gila or roka or saliva. So I'll say, so the feather is easy. If you think you know where the hissing sound is coming from, and you place a feather on top of that, and now when you fill it with air, what happens? The feather flutters, then you know that that's the hole in the lungs, and treifa. V'ilo, but I will say if at the end of the day you identify the place, you think you identify the place where the hissing sound is coming from. You place a feather over that, then you fill it with air, but the feather does not flutter, then what Rabbi say? That's clearly not a hole, and ultimately again, kshera. V'ilo yadinan. But I will say if you cannot identify, so I will say the idea is if you hear a hissing sound, you could have a hissing sound, but it's still, but if you put the feather on top of that, and what? The feather does not flutter, then what? Even though I know that's where the air is escaping, if that hole is so small that it doesn't cause the feather to flutter, then what? Then it's kosher. So this is actually very interesting. So in other words, and we're going to get into this more, but you could have a case of where I know there is a hole in the lungs, and I know there's air escaping. How do I know there's air escaping? How do I know? I hear it, right? But I will say, but if halacha l'maisa, the air escaping is not strong enough to go ahead and cause a feather to flutter, that is not a treifa. Incredible. And here's the great case. Then this is a good Sunday afternoon experiment. V'lo yadin Allah, right? And I will say, if I hear the hissing, but I can't figure out where it's coming from. So what do? Here we go. We'll say, watch this. My sinon mishichusa demaya pshuri. I take a basin filled with lukewarm water, umosvin Allah begava, and I put the lungs into the basin. So as I say, get the lungs, put them into the basin. What happens? Now the Gemara says, now this only works if you use lukewarm water. Why? Bichamimi lo. So we'll say, will not work with hot water. The kavtzi. Because we'll say, with hot water, the lungs will contract. Bikariri, it won't work with cold water. De mitarshi. Because ultimately, the lungs will harden. Ella bidakinale bipshura. So we'll say, the only way this works is with lukewarm water. So watch this. If you take these lungs and you put them in lukewarm water, imivats visa treifa. So I'll say, watch this. If when you put the lungs into the water, I'll say, watch this. The water bubbles. So I'll say, remember again, what does water bubbling represent? It represents air, which means that's what? There is a hole in the lungs. Now I will say, as we're going to see, what this really means is, if water bubbles come up, that shows that the outer membrane of the lung is damaged. If the outer membrane of the lung is damaged, then the animal is driven. So we'll say this is amazing. So this really is exciting. So as I say, so remember again, if halacha l'maisa, so watch this. We have to go through the stages over here. If I hear the hissing sound in the lungs, so step number one is what? Step number one is right, feather test. That's always the best way. Inflate the lungs. Put the feather over the place where you hear the hissing sound. So I'll say, so again, if the feather flutters, then treifa. If the feather doesn't flutter, no, keep checking. It's kosher. And I'll say, because again, remember, that's a case where you know, if I know the hissing sound is coming from here. So as I say, I've identified the hole. If the hole is large enough to cause the feather to flutter, it's a treifa. If the hissing sound is coming from there, but the hole is not big enough to cause the feather to flutter, animal is kosher. If I can't find the hissing sound, then what? Not just water. Don't say water, right? Lukewarm water, right? We'll say good. In what? In a basin. Put the lungs in the lukewarm water in the basin. If what? If bubbles come up, then I will say that ultimately shows that the animal is a treifa. V'lo. But I will say if bubbles do not come up in the water, then kshera. Then ultimately, again, the animal is kosher. I will say, now here's the problem. You see, I know something is punctured. How do I know something is punctured? I hear it. See, I will say, this case over here is I hear the hissing. So I know that air is escaping. So I will say, so then, so if the bubbles come up, I know the outer membrane is damaged. If bubbles don't come up, so I will say, so then what's the metzius? The Gemara says, Tasoy inkiv Eloi inkiv, lo inkiv. So what that tells me is the inner membrane of the lung is punctured, but the outer one is not. So the hissing that I hear is a puncture of the inner lung, but not a puncture of the outer, or I should say a puncture of the inner membrane, not a puncture of the outer membrane. And that's okay, because a puncture of the inner membrane does not make the animal a treifa, only a puncture of the outer membrane does. Incredible. V'hai da'avsha. And I will say that's what you hear, the hissing. Zeka de beni ubeni. I will say this is amazing. So what's the hissing I hear? The hissing, I will say, interestingly enough, is the air escaping between the membranes. This is fascinating. So the hissing sound there, I will say, is actually not air coming out of the lungs. It's actually air that's trapped or that's traveling in between the inner membrane, which is punctured, and the outer membrane, which is not. Incredible. Amar Ulu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Here we go, Bosei. Rea shenishpecha kekiton. This is another fascinating case. Bosei, so let's say you have, when you open up the animal, the inner part of the lungs pours out kekiton. So Bosei, in other words, the fleshy part inside the lungs has liquefied, but the membranes are still intact. So we'll say, so what's the status if the inner part of the lungs has liquefied? So when you open up the animal, it pours out, but the membranes are still intact. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Kshera. Ultimately, the animal is kosher. So what do you see from here? Look at Rashi, by the way. Shenishpacha kekiton, basar hareya nimuach besoch kromim shala. So apparently, in the lungs, there's some type of flesh on the inner part of the lungs. If that flesh liquefied to the point, I will say, when we say liquefied, what does liquefied mean? Mamish, you got like a lung shake on your hands, right? Mamish, like, it just poured. I know, it's not pretty, but it illustrates the point. Right? They will say, so the idea is that when you go ahead and you open it up, the mamish, the inner fleshy part of the lung pours out. But I will say, but here's the important part: the membranes are intact. The membranes are intact. That's what Rashi says. The krum. I'm sorry. Rashi shlishmecha kekiton pasarei nimuach besoch krom shala v'nishpach mirosha l'sofa misofa l'rosha. So as I say, the idea is that if you were to literally, again, I will say, like if you were to move the lung, you would hear it swishing on the inside. So you meaning that literally the inside of the lungs have become liquefied, but the membranes are intact. So I will say the halacha is, the Gemara says, kshera. What do you see from here? Alma kasavar. So from what do we see? Chisar mibifnim lo shmei chisar. We'll say what we see from here is that a deficiency on the inside of the lungs is not called the chisar. So we'll say the fact that the inner flesh is not intact is not considered to be a deficiency in the lung itself, and the animal is still kosher. Sve'ese Rabbi Abba li'ula. So Rabbi Abba raised the question to Ula. Hareya shenikva o shechasra. But 1 second, we learned before that what? That if the reya ultimately again was perforated, nikva, oshe chasra was deficient, so ultimately again it's not kosher. So Rabbosai, my chasra, what does chasera mean? Rabbosai in this case, deficient in what way? Ilema mi bachutz, if you want to say the outer part of the lung, Rabbosai, is chasra, is deficient, haynu nikva, that's the case of a perforated lung. Elarav mi bifnim. So it must be able to say that the cases where it's deficient on the outside. Ushmamina chisar min bifnim, shma chisar. And Rabbi say we see from here that's what? That if the flesh of the lung is deficient on the outside, that should be a treifa. To which the Gemara says, lo, li'ola mi bachutz. No, not true. In reality, Rabbi say when we say chasera, chasera means the outer part of the lung is missing. There's some deficiency there. V'deka amer tainu nikva. But you said, but 1 second, that's the case of nikva, that's the case of perforation. Lo tzricha l'Rabbi Shimon. The Amar ad shetinakev lebesas simponos. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi is one who said the lung is only possible when, or is only a treifa when, until it was perforated, until it reached what? The bronchi. Right? Until it got to the bronchi. Hanimili the nakav the less bachisaron. Rabbi say, when do we say that the perforation has to reach the bronchi? That's only when there's not an actual deficiency, there's not a chunk of the lung that's missing. Aval nokev de isbei chisaron. But I will say, if the perforation, mamish, is a piece of the lung that's deficient, then even if it doesn't reach the bronchi, even Rabbi Shimon Moda, even Rabbi Shimon would agree that ultimately, again, such a deficiency is problematic. Rabbi Chananya, let's listen to this case. Rabbi Chananya Chalash, we'll say this is crazy. Not crazy, I don't mean like that. This is wild. Rabbi Chananya was ill. Now, we'll say that ill, by the way, internally, the Gemara means that what? He's dying. Right? They will say, so again, this is like he has a head cold. So what happens? He's bedridden. I will say, get ready for this. Listen to this bigger cholim, is it? All the gabei Rabbi Nasan, v'chol gedoli hadar. So I will say, Rabbi Nasan, all the gedoli hadar come to God and be mavakir chola. So as you know, sometimes when you're mavakir chola, you bring something with you, a cake, right? Some tea, maybe some hot cocoa. So what do they bring? Aisu kamei reya shenish b'cha kekiton. We'll say, what do they show up with? A set of lungs. Right? They'll say they showed up with a set of lungs. Not only any set of lungs, but a set of lungs mamish that like the inside are swishing side to side. Right? So they show up with a set of lungs, I will say, where the entire inner part of the flesh of the lungs have what? Have liquefied. And what happens? V'achshira. So we'll say, by the way, I just want to tell you something. That's a Rebbe. Right? They will say, no, all kings sign. That's a Rebbe. I will say, a Rebbe is someone who teaches Torah to his Talmidim in all times. He's feeling well, he's not feeling well, he's young, he's old, he's vital, he's on his deathbed. I will say, a Rebbe or a Rebbe is someone who is always teaching his Talmidim. So they show up with a set of lungs, they say, Rebbe, what's the status? Rabbi Chananya says, it's good. It's good. So we'll say, so again, it's very important. So we'll say, and this, by the way, is going to be halacha l'maisa. That even if Mam Shabbos, to be clear, the operative point over here is what's still intact? What's still intact? The membranes, right? The membranes are still intact. And the truth is, happens to be in this case, both the inner and the outer membranes are intact. But as we already saw, that's what? As long as the outer membrane is intact, even if the inner membrane, I will say, is compromised, it's still going to be okay. But the mice, again, in this case, I will say, mamish, the entire inner flesh of the lungs have liquefied. Rabbi Chananya says it's good. Amar Rava, so we'll say Rava just gives some important qualifications. V'hu dekami simponos. I will say this is only true of what? The bronchi themselves still have to be intact. Right? In other words, we're talking about the inner fleshy part of the lungs has liquefied. That's fine, as long as the membranes and Rava is adding in. The bronchi have to also be intact. How do you know if the bronchi are still intact? So watch this. This is incredible. I'll tell you how you know. Take a, we'll say, now kunya, we'll say, is an earthenware vessel that's coated with lead. Clay kunya, we'll say, we saw this back in our Avodah Zarah days. I don't mean, let me say that again. Back in our Maseches Avodah Zarah days. Right, we'll say, we saw this. We saw this, thank you. Right, we'll say, we saw this ultimately again. You put the lungs into this clay kunya, into this earthenware vessel coated with lead. So I'll say, what happens? You put water in there. I ispe shuraiki chiyure trefa. I will say, if in the water there are white streaks, so I will say those white streaks are the dissolved bronchi, right? So if there are white streaks, that means that not only did the fleshy inner part of the lung dissolve, but what else dissolved? The bronchi dissolved as well. That's a trefa. V'ilo, but I will say if in the water you do not have dissolved white streaks, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, the inner fleshy part of the lung has dissolved, but ultimately again the lung is still kosher, the bronchi is still intact. Rav Nachman, reya shenimuka ukrum shalakayim. So what Rav Nachman says, if the lung itself dissolved, and I will say again, we're talking about over here the inner fleshy part of the lung dissolved, ukrum shala, but the membrane is still intact, then what's the halacha kshera? Ultimately, again, the animal is still kosher. Tanya mihachira, what's your Braisa that supports this? Reya shenimuka, if you have a lung which dissolved, which we're referring to the inner fleshy part of the lung dissolved, ukrum shalakayim, but the membrane is still intact. Afilu machzekes revius. I will say, what this is talking about over here is that mamish, the lung itself is so hollow because all of the flesh inside has dissolved. that you could literally put the revius of liquid inside the lung, which most says a lot of liquid inside the lung, then kshera. Ultimately, again, the animal is kosher. So bottom line, what comes out is what? Even if the inner fleshy part of the lung has dissolved, as long as what? The membranes and the bronchi are still intact, ultimately, again, it's going to be okay. How do you know if the bronchi is still intact? So that's the water test. If there are white streaks in the water, that ultimately indicates the bronchi has dissolved, no white streaks, you are good to go. Next, nitla, top of memches, shalfuchis shalo kshera. Rabbi Seif, ultimately, again, shalfuchis. Now Rashi says, krum shavlat munachba. Rabbi Seif, this is the womb. If the womb of the animal has been removed or has disintegrated in some way, kshera. Ultimately, again, that is not a siman treifa. The animal is still okay. Very interesting case. Hitliya kaved shala. We'll say, what happens if the liver became wormy? The liver became wormy. So we'll say, so the liver is somehow decomposing. There's some type of worms in there. What's the status of the animal? This is actually very interesting. Zehaya maisa. This actually happened. Va'alu alea b'nei Asya gimel regalim liyavna. And for 3 straight regalim, people of b'nei Asya went to Yavna. But now, why Yavna? Because remember again, during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, so ultimately again, even before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Sanhedrin was already golet to Yavna. So apparently again, some members of the city of Asya went up to ask this Shaila, and they went up 3 regalim. For whatever the reason, I will say, the Sanhedrin and Asya were reticent to paskin on this. So it took them 3 trips to Asya, the regal shlishi hetiru lahem. And I will say, in the 3rd regal, they paskin that a wormy liver does not go ahead and make the animal a treif. And I will say, that is indeed halacha l'maisa. If you cut up with the animal and you find out that the liver is wormy, I don't know if you want to eat the animal, but lamaisa again is not a treifa and you can eat the animal.